and I take great pleasure in calling the member for Chifley.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. There's only one reason why we're considering this bill tonight, and that is because on election eve, across a range of commitments that was given by then opposition leader, now Prime Minister Tony Abbott, in that range of commitments that was made, hand on heart, what would happen, designed to influence the way that people voted at the election. A commitment was made, among other things, that there would be no cuts to the SBS. Knowing that there was a strong level of support within the community for public broadcasting, the Prime Minister went out of his way repeatedly to indicate that there'd be no cuts to funding. Then, subsequent to this, gets into office and, as we have seen since their time post the 2013 election, all these commitments that were made, support that was secured off the back of these commitments were trashed, and we had a situation where the public broadcasters were to lose funding, and in an attempt to try and make up for that, and while the coalition dresses this up as an efficiency dividend, it's clear that it is cut, and the public broadcasters have no choice but to attempt to do these type of things, secure more advertising in an attempt to make up for funds lost or the financial pressure that is exerted on them by the coalition, which many people know in their heart of hearts do not support public broadcasters, because for quite some time they've maintained a position that is unsubstantiated, that the public broadcasters are completely anti-coalition, and that as a result they will face this type of punishment through lower funding, greater pressure on their operations, and therefore less capacity for them to undertake the type of broadcasting that the coalition believes is against their political interests, which is complete and utter rubbish. So we have this bill, and Labor has already indicated that it is against the proposed amendments to the SBS Act, because these changes, as we indicate, are a covert attempt by the Prime Minister to force SBS to run more advertising to earn money at the same time as cutting their budget, and clear breach of an election promise. And these amendments are a blatant attempt by the government to turn SBS into another commercial broadcaster, bearing in mind commercial broadcasters are already under financial pressure of their own, but they intend to turn SBS into a commercial broadcaster instead of letting them focus on their main objective, one of which is being to effectively be the country's main multicultural broadcaster. People in my area have developed a particular view about SBS, rightly so. SBS has not endeared itself to Western Sydney, and in particular the areas of Western Sydney that I represent in this place. In fact, their actions over the last few weeks, with specific reference to a particular program, Struggle Street, have done nothing to engender support for SBS, and if anything, to turn the views of the people that I represent in this place quite against SBS, and rightly so. SBS, in its own charter, its key objectives are to promote diversity in Australia and contribute to the understanding and acceptance of cultural, ethnic and socio-economic diversity within the broader community. Like many others who valued SBS growing up, I certainly operated on the belief that this public broadcaster would offer a chance to broaden public perspective, that it would help better or generate better appreciation of the challenges and demands of others in the community, but not to do so in a way that demeans or denigrates. And recently, SBS did just that. They engaged in questionable methods in their filming and production procedures when producing the show that I've referenced, Struggle Street. They targeted a number of families within the electorate of Chifley. Many of the constituents that have contacted me say this show, and they're right to say this, reinforces improper, unfair stereotypes of the people living in this part of Western Sydney. But the biggest problem is with the show is the ethical missteps that occurred by SBS and the production company Keogh Films. And I want to focus in particular, one of the biggest ethical issues that stood out to me is the issue of consent, because it became apparent that the people featured in this program by SBS did not give informed consent to be featured in this television program. It raises serious questions about how SBS and Keogh Films went through the process of obtaining consent. These were experienced filmmakers and TV broadcasters dealing with inexperienced and vulnerable participants who were not provided with copies of the release forms once they were signed, participants not offered independent legal advice before consulting to be filmed or consenting to be filmed, then these issues are serious, most serious, especially in the context of filming underage children and people with diminished capacity or disability. And out of the 11 people that the first episode focused on, one person is said to be suffering from cognitive impairment that caused periods of confusion and anxiety. Another depicted to be frequently under the influence of the drug ice and had several scenes related to their drug use. One person suffered permanent brain damage from a motorcycle accident, and many more participants depicted to be habitual drug users and frequently under the influence. So serious questions would legitimately be raised about the capacity of these people to give simple consent, much less informed consent. Brain damage and mental illness do not preclude a person from being informed about their rights or being able to advocate for their own needs. But for their inclusion in a television show, particularly one of this nature, it calls for a much more rigorous approach to consent other than just simply getting these people's signatures on forms. Consent is the cornerstone of journalistic and professional ethics, and it was simply breached here. Since SBS and Keogh films seemingly skirt serious ethical issues, I fail to see how this program is in line with the SBS Charter or its principal functions and duties. And in light of these serious breaches of conduct, I would certainly be calling on SBS and Keogh films to undertake the following, and that is to drop the legal action that they have threatened the Mayor of Blacktown with, Councillor Stephen Barley. Councillor Barley was right in his position to voice the deep objection of our area to the way in which people from our area were portrayed by this program, particularly in the promotions around this program. They were treated as simple comedic fodder by SBS, there to be denigrated, demeaned, and all for one purpose and one purpose only, to boost ratings. SBS management and Keogh Films did not care for one bit about the lasting impact on the people that I mentioned, and they certainly didn't care about people in our area who have always had to struggle against stereotype about their capability, capacity and their right to participate in broader society. And SBS believed that they could turn these people into a joke, and when we objected, through our own mayor, what did they try to do? They tried to threaten legal action against him for raising those concerns, simply in an attempt to shut his voice out of this debate, stop him from raising what many of us felt was unfair treatment by a public broadcaster that should have known better. Councillor Barley and Blacktown Council were simply standing up for our community and wanted to make sure people were portrayed in a better, fairer light. And there are many people across neighbourhoods in the electorate I represent that work hard to change their own lives but also open up opportunities for others. And they do it with few resources. They have to fight to hold on to these resources and protect them wherever they can. And the even bigger challenge is to help those who feel the weight of stigma and low esteem generated by it. I regularly have, for example, young people in the Chifley electorate approach me saying they will not list their residential address on resumes for fear of being turned down or denied job opportunities because employers view them in a less favourable light. This is what people in my area have fought for some time. I know their capability. I know their ability to participate. I know what they can bring in an employment or a community context because I see it every single day. Yet SBS thinks that by putting out particularly promotions that turn people in our area into a joke or a laughing stock, they believe that's fair game. And if you dare object to this, if you dare say that they are doing the wrong thing, they then try to slap legal orders on you to threaten you from objecting to that. This is a disgrace that a public broadcaster can do this, particularly to people in my area. And I want to be able to say, for the people in my area who I'm enormously proud of, people who, for example, like the students from Loyola Senior High that were on ABC's Q&A program recently, speaking out against Struggle Street, and highlighting the fact that they do great things. Students like Johanna Larkin, who highlighted the stigmatisation of Mount Druitt on a national level and delivered her question with such conviction that Struggle Street was debated between the audience and panellists for most of that episode of Q&A. We have a lot of other community groups in this area that are doing great things to change the fortunes of people that may otherwise not have the ability or the chance to fully participate in society. I think, for example, of Mount Druitt's Learning Ground at Bidwell doing terrific things in helping people get a second chance. It is, as I've said often, the home for second chances, helping turn people's lives around. They do so with the minimum of funding, and they don't have a chance to show the great work that they do. Or Eagle Raps, that is at the risk of losing funding in my area, who were portrayed on this particular program and were denied the chance to show all the good things that they do in their area and that I see quite often. All the schools and community groups, the sporting organisations in our area that achieve well. Chifley College, Bidwell campus, they have a rugby union team that is competing with some of the best in the state. You don't get to see anything that they do in this area. Ted Knopfs and the Street University right now are compiling great stories and inspirational ones about the things that they're seeing in our local community, and they are having to do it in response to the negative views that are being expressed or being portrayed through this show. So I certainly think that there should be more opportunity for good news, and I certainly call on the public broadcaster SBS to undertake some of that to correct what they have done and the damage they've caused in our area. I'd like shows to come out and be able to do just that, to discuss the type of social issues that are being dealt with in some neighbourhoods within our area, because the reality is there'll be always something that you like about your neighbourhood and there'll be things that you like to change about your neighbourhood. That is not alien to any suburb in this country. However, people in our area have had to put up with these type of things for many years and do not need the reinforcement of it. And to be honest, I do not know in this case why the federal government refused to actually carry the views of or the concerns of people from Western Sydney. Conservative politicians have no problem chipping public broadcasters if they're chipping other Conservative politicians. But when we relied upon the government to actually say to SBS that what they were doing out of line, they refused to. I note the presence of the Communications Minister, who expressed a view that it was not his job to be raising the concerns of people about Struggle Street. He said it's not his job to influence the mandate of the broadcaster, yet he felt, and I say this directly to him, that he could express his views about certain members or representatives of the public broadcaster of the ABC on the Bolt report. If it's good enough to raise those views there, Minister, why wouldn't you speak up for the people that have been mistreated by SBS's Struggle Street, people in my area who don't deserve to be turned into comical material by SBS in the way that they did that promotion? People in my area who I know for a fact if you were there with them, you would feel just as strongly as I do. And I feel that you should be speaking up for the people of this area, because I know in you, Minister, that you would not support that type of treatment. And I think people would have benefited from you expressing the view, rightly so, that a promotion that categorised people in this area in this way was wrong and out of line and should not have been conducted in the way it was. And you could speak with equal fervour about that, as you have in other instances where you believe the public broadcaster has not acted in a way that has met expectation. I certainly feel strongly about it. I certainly believe, Minister, if I can say to you, it is wrong for SBS to threaten public figures with legal action because they dare react to the unfair way in which SBS categorise people in our area, and I would certainly urge you to consider that in due course. But if SBS wants more advertising to promote this type of rubbish TV that has gone on and demeaned the people of the area that I represent, then quite frankly, from my own perspective, and putting aside all the great and the points that have been expressed by our side in this chamber, I certainly feel they should not have the opportunity to continue to denigrate people that I feel deserve a better chance than what was expressed or demonstrated by SBS in that terrible program.
I thank the member for Chifley. The question is that